Hi, welcome to my garden. I think tomorrow morning we're going to have a blushing bride. This lotus is something I've been looking forward to for a couple years. I got a question about how do we know when to harvest things? Watermelons specifically. I wanted to do an episode yesterday, but I spent most of the time researching and I talked to a commercial farmer. Watermelons are a challenge. Now if you've got a great big field and they're all close, chances are you're going to get quite a few ripe ones. Part of their strategy is variety and physical quantity. I was told that if you got a field, you come up and you pat them, which gives a kind of a thud, chances are you're going to have quite a few ripe ones. And if you get a few that aren't ripe, well, that's your return aisle. One of the things they talked about is if you got a white spot on the bottom, and this one does, and then you look at the color itself. It's not shiny, it almost has a powder on it, but it's not really a powder. Then if you want to look at the leaves, this first leaf here, that's dried all the way up. We've got a little Charleston gray kind of grow up next to this one. This curly Q is a good indicator when it dries all the way out, and this one's getting pretty dry, but we still have this leaf, and it's not completely gone, but it's going quickly. So, and then that thumping sound. I think we're getting pretty close on this watermelon. Here's the deal. We've invested time into this. We've been watching this. This has all the signs, and it's got a little sun scald on it. But it's a little smaller, and it sounds kind of hollow. But also, that stem is still pretty stiff right there. I'm going to go ahead and leave that one on for another day. I'm probably wrong. And of course, when I planted these, and then planted the sweet potatoes, I had no idea it was going to run over this far, be this covered up. So this hasn't had any sun on it. But you can see that color is off. I cannot find the little curly Q. It's up against the fence here. I think this needs to stay on another day. But it's close. Now I did go ahead and plant some black diamonds late, and they're making some pretty nice fruit. But here again, we've got a little discolored, but it's still yellow. It's not white. Curly Q is still fine. Leaves are still fine. These aren't supposed to get very big, but I think it's probably going to be double that size. I'm sorry, that's the best answer I can give you on watermelons. I'm no expert on watermelons by any means, and the one that we got the other day, I'm just blessed. And the professionals say it's a coin flip. Each one of those tips that I talked about are indications, so keep an eye on that. There's a couple other things I want to talk about harvesting. Now our tomatoes, which is well above my head, they've slowed down a little bit in this heat, but the fall tomatoes are coming on really nice. The reason I take them when they blush is the plant has stopped putting stuff into them. Now the tomatoes we grow taste better than the ones in the store. I've been doing a little research on that, and I will come out with an episode here pretty quick that tells you exactly why. There's chemicals that the tomato produces, there's sugars, there's other things. There's good chemicals and sugars that our plant makes in the garden that the commercial growers bred out so that they could ship. And the commercial ones, they ship really well, but they don't taste very good. And the ones that we plant in our garden are usually the varieties that we like, so obviously they're going to taste better. And there is a controversy on whether you let them go completely ripe. It doesn't hurt the plant if you let them go completely ripe, but if you're not spraying a lot of stuff, you're going to have critters out there competing for those. So I bring them on in so I get them. Let's take a quick look at beans, peas, and cucumbers. The plant strategy is to get fruit out there with seeds as quickly as possible. And we can use that strategy against them. So by picking often and early, we force that plant to continue to produce fruit for us. And if you stay after it, you're going to have a lot of fruit for a long time. So when should we start harvesting our sweet potatoes? Well, you can go by the calendar, and that's one good way, and you're going to have regular sized sweet potatoes. I plant on Memorial Day, and I harvest right before the frost. I let them get just as big as they want to. I found that the Beauregards don't get stringy or break or split but that's just been my experience. So I'm not harvesting sweet potatoes until it just about frosts. Then we'll see what we get. And that's going to be the same for the turmeric. We're going to let them grow just as long as we can let them grow. They're a tropical plant, and the longer you let them go, the more tubers you have. Now, as far as your peppers go, it depends on what kind of peppers you have. This is a sweet Mad Hatter. They come on green, but they turn orange. They don't get their full flavor until they turn orange. So we can pick them now, but they're not going to be as good as if we wait. Some of your other peppers, and your bell peppers, when they come on green, then they're not totally mature until they're red and or yellow. Your habaneros come on green, and they're not ready to pick until they're bright orange. So it depends on your taste, what kind of flavor you want, and just exactly how long you can wait before you get some of that. And I'm just seeing if there's any one of these that I can just maybe try. See, this one's getting a little bit of color. This one's getting a little bit of color. It's pretty good size. See what we get. See, that's really, really good, but it's not as good as it will be when it turns orange. The sweet Mad Hatters are not hot. They've got a really sweet taste. Now our really hot ones, they haven't started putting on peppers yet, but they are getting some flowers on. We're not going to pick them until they're good and colorful. And of course your crookneck squash, you want them to be a little bit bigger than this, but there again, they get too big, then they start getting tough. Now your Swiss chard, you can take about 20% of that plant consistently, and it'll continue to grow really nicely. When it comes to corn, you don't want to harvest until the silks turn brown. And as far as your root crops go, this goes for all of them, whenever you start seeing the root, they're ready to come up. That's not a half bad radish. And now that we made a pretty good swing around the garden, I hope that helps you a little bit to decide what you want to pick and when you want to pick it. It's not a real science. Here's a proof. When you got berry bushes, you only have to eat 1 or 2 sour berries before you start knowing what the right size and what the right taste is. I learned the hard way when I was a kid. Nothing like a sour grape. I think our week of cool weather is about over. The wind stopped blowing. It's about 95. Humidity's about 1,000,000. You can hear the tractors around the neighborhood. They're haying right now, trying to get that hay in before it gets hot and starts drying up. Remember, you can do this too. If you want to learn a little bit more about the deep mulch, just click that link right there and I'll meet you back in the garden. If you want to learn about the living soil, click that link right there and I'll meet you back in the garden. If you want to see the biggest watermelon I've ever grown, click that link right there and I'll meet you back in the garden. And until next time, remember, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and God bless you. Come on, let's plant.
Let's go plant garden.